The shuttle's descent burned a thin white scar across the copper sky as the dunes below shifted like a restless sea. Heat shimmered off the horizon in mirages that twisted the air, making distance itself a deception. Elias Corrin adjusted his collar as the cabin temperature climbed. Thessera Prime's light was a red, bruised thing, too harsh for human eyes and too ancient to forgive mistakes. He'd read every diplomatic manual the consortium had issued, memorized every protocol about dealing with the Thessari, and still he knew none of it would help him when he stood before her. A soft chime pulsed in his earpiece. Atmospheric pressure stable. Radiation minimal. "You may proceed, Elias," said Selka, 9, its voice layered and calm, like 3 harmonized tones of wind over stone. "I can't very well turn back now," Elias murmured. The shuttle touched down with a gentle hiss, the sand swirling around its landing struts like living silk. When the hatch opened, the smell hit him, dry, metallic, faintly sweet, like heated quartz. He stepped into the heat, boots sinking slightly into powder-fine dust. Before him, the estate of Lady Virith rose from the desert like a mirage made solid. Curved spires of obsidian glass reached toward the sky, etched with shimmering sigils that pulsed faintly in time with the planet's magnetic hum. A perimeter of silver banners rippled in the wind, their edges crackling with faint plasma fields. It was both fortress and temple, a statement of wealth and dominance carved into the heart of the dead sands. 4 Thessari attendants waited at the entrance, their elongated forms motionless. They were smaller than their matriarch, but still massive, scaled, winged, their faces a blend of reptilian grace and unsettling intelligence. Their eyes glowed faintly, reflecting him like mirrors. The tallest stepped forward. "Human. Identify your purpose before you cross sacred ground." Elias bowed slightly, keeping his movements deliberate. Elias Corrin, representative of the Terran Consortium, Department of Terraforming and Resource Ethics. Here by treaty right and registered claim. The attendant's nostrils flared. "Claim," he echoed, as though the word itself were a blasphemy. Elias produced a shimmering data wafer from his satchel. Filed under the revised Interplanetary Property Accords, ratified by the Thessari Council of 12. A hiss of air escaped the creature's throat, something like laughter stripped of humor. "Wait," it said, turning toward the estate's inner gates. The others followed, wings shifting restlessly. Elias stood alone under the glare of the dying sun, sweat rolling down his neck. The silence of Thessera Prime was immense. No birds, no insects, just the soft whisper of sand moving across sand, a planet holding its breath. Minutes passed before the gates parted with a low, resonant hum. Heat and light poured out as if from the mouth of a forge. From within emerged Lady Virith of House Nerith. She was vast. Her scales were molten bronze, alive with reflections of the sun. Her eyes, faceted and ancient, regarded him with the weight of centuries. Even folded, her wings cast long shadows across the sand, and the faint steam rising from her skin carried the mineral scent of the geothermal pools behind her. She moved with a grace that defied her size, her claws leaving delicate impressions in the dust. "You are far from your metal hives, little human," she said. Her voice was not sound but vibration, felt more in the bones than heard in the ear. "And you come bearing claims upon my earth?" Elias steadied his breathing. Under mutual treaty law, the consortium has authorized reclamation rights to dormant subsurface aquifers. The coordinates fall beneath your estate, but ownership extends. Ownership? The word came out like the strike of molten glass. "You think to own that which breathes beneath me?" Her wings flared slightly, a shimmer of light and heat rippling outward. The attendants bowed low, their eyes avoiding hers. "The sands of Nerith are bound to my lineage. They are not yours to dissect with human machines." Elias felt the air pulse around him, charged with static. His heart thudded once, hard, but he didn't flinch. "I'm not here to dissect, Lady Virith. I'm here to restore. To make the desert live again." Her laughter was slow, dangerous. You believe your fragile technology can correct the will of a dying star. Your kind has always been ambitious. Ambitious, he said quietly, or hopeful. Sometimes the difference is just patience. She regarded him for a long moment, eyes narrowing slightly. Your voice does not shake. Do you not fear me? I understand fear, Elias said. But I came here knowing what I was walking into. You have every right to defend your home. I only ask that you let me prove why this work matters. The dragon's gaze flicked toward the distant horizon, where the dunes rolled endlessly under the fading sun. Humans have always been builders, she murmured. And destroyers. Her tail swept across the sand, leaving a deep groove. You think to dig beneath my estate and drain its lifeblood. You will find nothing but stone and memory. Elias met her gaze, the air between them wavering with heat. Then you won't mind if I'm wrong. The attendants bristled, a ripple of movement like rustling metal. One hissed, but Virith silenced him with a flick of her claw. Her expression changed, curiosity tempered with disdain. You are bold, Elias Corrin of the consortium. Boldness is often the final act of the desperate. I prefer to think of it as necessary, he said. Then you may keep your claim, she said, turning away. For now. But understand this, every grain of sand you disturb, I will feel. Every drop of water you draw from my earth, I will taste. If your machines harm what is mine, I will scatter your bones across the dunes until the sun forgets you ever existed. She walked past him, the ground trembling faintly under her steps. As she entered the estate gates, she glanced back once, her eyes gleaming like molten amber. Tell your masters that Thessera Prime belongs to the Thessari still. The gates closed behind her with a thunderous resonance that rolled across the desert. Elias exhaled slowly, the air thick with the scent of scorched dust. Selka Nine's voice returned in his earpiece, calm and analytical. Initial contact complete. Probability of negotiation success, 12%. Elias smiled faintly, eyes on the sealed gates. Then we'll just have to raise the odds. He turned toward the horizon, where the sand shifted faintly over hidden shapes below, drones already burrowing into the deep earth, unseen and patient. The first quiet hum of machinery merged with the whisper of the wind, and Thessera Prime listened. The sun had begun to sag toward the horizon, a molten wound bleeding orange light across the dunes. The air shimmered as if the planet itself were exhaling. Elias waited at the outer courtyard of the estate, escorted by 2 Thessari attendants whose wings folded tight against their backs like drawn blades. Their silence was absolute, broken only by the faint hum of the geothermal vents that pulsed beneath the ground. The air carried the scent of minerals and faint steam, like breathing in stone. A chime rippled through the courtyard, not sound but vibration, deep and resonant. The attendants lowered their heads and stepped aside. Elias looked up as the obsidian doors opened, revealing the inner sanctum. A wave of heat rolled out, heavy and damp, clinging to his skin. He took a steadying breath and stepped inside. The chamber stretched vast and luminous, its ceiling carved from translucent crystal that refracted the dying sunlight into red and gold shards. Water coursed through narrow channels cut into the floor, winding in intricate patterns that glowed faintly blue. In the center lay a pool large enough to swallow a shuttle, its surface steaming, alive with rippling light. Lady Virith was there, half submerged in the waters of her private spring. Her scales caught the light and refracted it in molten tones, copper, gold, violet, like the surface of a sun caught mid-explosion. Her wings rested against the edge of the pool, partly unfurled, and her claws traced slow circles in the steaming water. She did not rise when Elias entered. She merely looked at him, and in that gaze was the weight of ages. "You returned," she said. Her voice flowed through the chamber, soft but resonant, vibrating in his bones. "I wondered if the heat would drive you back to your ship." "I thought it polite to accept your invitation," Elias said. He stepped closer, the soles of his boots echoing faintly. Viritha's eyes narrowed slightly. "Invitation?" I summoned you to remind you of your place. Do not confuse tolerance with welcome. I wouldn't dare, Elias said evenly. But you seem interested enough to hear what I have to say. She regarded him in silence for a long moment. Then, with a ripple of motion, she rose from the pool. Steam drifted around her like smoke. Her wings caught the light and filled the chamber with gold reflections that danced across the crystal walls. The sheer scale of her made him feel as though he stood before a living monument carved from myth. You stand on hallowed ground, she said. This oasis was forged by my ancestors in the first age of fire. When the oceans boiled away, it was we who saved what little water remained. Every droplet that touches this sand has passed through the hands of my bloodline. And yet your kind, her voice darkened, believes it can purchase what was never for sale. Elias drew a slow breath. The consortium doesn't wish to take this from you. It's trying to bring Thessera Prime back to life. Back to life, she echoed, tilting her head. You speak as though it ever died. The planet breathes differently now, that is all. It has adapted to the age of heat. Why can humans never leave what is broken to rest? Because sometimes it isn't broken, he said. Sometimes it's waiting. Viratha's eyes flared with a golden sheen. You speak in riddles. Do you think that impresses me? No, Elias said quietly. But maybe it makes you curious. For a long heartbeat, the chamber stilled. Then, to his surprise, she laughed. It was a sound like molten rock cracking under pressure, raw, echoing, alive. You are braver than you should be, she said. Most who stand before me bow until their spines ache. You stand there like the desert itself, dry, unyielding, waiting for something impossible. Elias allowed a faint smile. Perhaps I am. She moved closer, each step shaking the floor in a slow, deliberate rhythm. When she lowered her head, her breath brushed his face, warm and metallic. Tell me, human, do you understand what it means to own land here? I understand what it means to care for it, he said. Her pupils contracted to slits. Care. You claim ownership of my undergrounds and call it care. Your species wraps greed in gentle words. Then watch what I build, he said softly. Judge me by the result, not by the fear others plant in you. Virith drew back slightly, her expression unreadable. You presume much, Elias Corrin. Only enough to believe this world still has a future. The steam between them shifted, coiling upward. Outside, thunder rumbled, a sound rare on Thessera Prime, born of geothermal vents deep below. For a moment, even she turned her gaze toward the ceiling as if listening to the pulse of the world. Your machines, she said finally, her tone quieter. They hum beneath my sands already. I can feel their vibrations. What are they doing? Measuring, he said. Mapping the old aquifers. There's movement below your estate, channels that might still hold water sealed for millennia. I can reach them without touching your oasis. Her tail lashed once, scattering droplets across the pool. If you disturb what lies beneath, you'll wake things you cannot understand. Elias met her gaze. Then perhaps it's time someone did. Viratha's eyes softened, not with kindness, but with the faintest glimmer of intrigue. You are a contradiction, human. Foolish enough to challenge a dragon, and wise enough to do it without raising your voice. Sometimes the only way forward, he said, is not through force. For a long moment, neither spoke. The water in the pool rippled softly, reflecting shards of red light that danced between them. Virith turned at last, her wings folding close. You will have one cycle, she said. One day and one night to prove that your presence will not scar this land. After that, I will decide whether you leave walking or as dust on the wind. Elias nodded once. That's all I ask. As he turned to leave, her voice followed him, low and distant. Do not mistake my curiosity for mercy, human. The desert loves nothing that does not bleed for it. He paused at the threshold, the heat pressing against his back. Then it will have my sweat before it ever has my blood, he said, and stepped into the twilight. Behind him, the doors closed with a deep reverberation. Virith watched the fading glow of the chamber reflect off the water's surface, her claws trailing faint ripples. The human scent still lingered in the air, earth, metal, something sharp beneath it. For the first time in centuries, the Dragon Lady of Thessera Prime felt a sliver of anticipation. The night stretched cold and thin over the desert, the heat bleeding away into the stars. Thessera Prime's twin moons hung low, one pale white, the other a smoldering ember of red. Elias stood at the edge of the dunes near his temporary camp, the estate's black spires glinting faintly in the distance. The silence here had weight. Even the wind moved like a careful thing, wary of disturbing the sleeping sand. Selka 9 hovered nearby, its form a lattice of shifting blue light. Perimeter established. Subsurface drones active. Local temperature decreasing as expected. Do you wish to begin mapping? Elias nodded, his breath visible in the cooling air. Begin passive scans only. No drilling. Not until sunrise. Understood. The AI's projection dissolved into 1,000 glittering motes, dispersing across the dunes like fireflies. Elias crouched, scooping a handful of sand and letting it run through his fingers. It was fine as dust, catching the starlight like powdered glass. Beneath all this, water, ancient and sealed away. He could almost feel it, like a pulse under the skin of the planet. A sound broke the stillness, a faint rustle, heavier than wind. He turned. From the crest of a dune emerged a smaller Thessari, wings folded tight, scales the color of tarnished silver. The creature moved with the silent confidence of one who belonged here. Elias straightened but didn't reach for his sidearm. You trespass under the eye of the matriarch, the Thessari said, voice edged with youth and arrogance. You were told to remain within her walls until judgment. I wasn't aware curiosity was a crime, Elias replied. The younger being hissed softly. Humans always twist words when trapped. You think because she grants you a day's grace, you are safe. Her patience is a storm, you only feel the calm before it strikes. I don't need safety, Elias said. I just need time. The Thessari tilted his head, eyes narrowing. Time for what? Proof. Elias stepped closer, slow enough not to provoke. You feel the tremors under your feet? The ground shifts, ever so slightly. That's not machinery destroying your sands. It's mapping the old arteries of your world. You've forgotten how alive this desert once was. The youth's wings twitched. The desert is what it was meant to be. Is it? Elias asked. Or is it what it became after your people stopped listening to it? The Thessari's jaw tensed, but something flickered in his expression, uncertainty. You speak as if you understand this planet. I don't, Elias said. But I'm trying to. The young Thessari hesitated a moment longer, then turned sharply and disappeared into the dunes without another word. Elias watched the silver glimmer vanish against the starlit sand, then exhaled and tapped his earpiece. Selka, did you record that? Audio confirmed, the AI replied. Species, Thessari juvenile, House Nerith crest visible. Possible messenger or scout. She's testing me, Elias said. Or warning me. Either way, it means she's paying attention. Her biosignature remains within her estate. She observes remotely. I assumed as much. Elias rubbed his hands together, the cold biting through his gloves. Run the deep resonance scan. Let's see what's sleeping beneath her oasis. The dunes vibrated faintly as Selka's microdrones sank deeper, their sensors reaching kilometers below. The reading scrolled across Elias's wrist display, subterranean caverns, compressed mineral strata, then something else, a network of hollow chambers filled with dense vapor pockets. The pattern wasn't natural. Selka, he whispered, those channels, they're shaped. Carved. Preliminary data suggests artificial origin, the AI said. Possibly Thessari pre-collapse architecture. Old enough to have been forgotten. Elias's pulse quickened. If those are sealed reservoirs, they could still hold liquid reserves. Warning, seismic instability detected. Minor movement along the fourth stratum. Recommend pause. Elias ignored it. Focus on the nearest pocket, northwest quadrant. It connects directly beneath her estate. Before Selka could respond, the air around him shifted. The dunes rippled, grains of sand lifting into the air as if drawn upward by invisible hands. A low hum filled the night. Elias turned, and there she was. Lady Virith stood atop the ridge, her wings outstretched against the moons, her eyes burning like molten glass. The heat of her presence rolled down the slope in waves. "I told you not to disturb my sands," she said, her voice carrying across the desert like a storm. Elias shielded his face from the swirling dust. "They're only sensors. No drills, no extraction." "You lie," she hissed. "I feel the pulse of your machines like knives in my skin." The ground trembled. Beneath his boots, the sand rippled outward, alive under her control. Elias steadied himself, the display on his wrist flashing warnings. "If you destroy the drones now," he said, raising his voice against the wind, "you'll lose what they found." Her gaze narrowed. "What could you possibly find that I have not already claimed?" "Water," Elias said. "Buried deep, trapped by fault pressure. Enough to feed this whole valley. You felt the tremor because the earth is waking." The wind stopped. The sand froze midair, glittering around her like suspended glass. Viritha's expression wavered between fury and something else, doubt. "You dare to speak of rebirth on this cursed world?" "I dare to prove it," Elias said. "You've protected this desert for centuries. Let me show you what it could become again." For a long time she said nothing. Then the sand fell, raining softly between them. The moon's light traced her outline, making her seem both majestic and tired. "You play with forces you cannot understand," she said at last. "But I will allow you this delusion, for now. If your meddling brings harm, I will end it myself." "I wouldn't expect anything less," he said. Her wings folded close, scales glimmering like cooling metal. "You have until dawn," she said, and with a single beat of her wings, she lifted into the air, vanishing into the heat haze horizon. Elias stood alone again, the desert settling back into its silence. Selka's voice returned, softer than before. "Probability of her cooperation has increased. Emotional resonance detected, uncertainty, curiosity, restrained hostility." "She's listening," Elias said quietly. "That's all I needed." The wind stirred once more, carrying the faint scent of ozone and mineral steam. Elias turned his gaze toward the estate silhouette against the moons, his eyes reflecting the faint blue glow of his scanner. Somewhere beneath that desert skin, water waited. And so did she. The first light of dawn bled slowly across the dunes, washing the world in pale gold. The heat of Thessera Prime returned like a living thing, crawling back over the sands as if reclaiming them from the night. Elias stood beside the main relay hub, the faint hum of buried drones pulsing beneath his boots. He hadn't slept. His eyes were fixed on the data streaming across his wrist display, the pulse of the desert rendered as a shifting hologram of light and depth. "Subsurface scan complete," Selka 9 reported, its voice crisp in the morning stillness. "An interconnected aquifer system confirmed at 2.7 kilometers depth. Estimated capacity, 30 million cubic meters of condensed vapor. Composition suggests recoverable water, though sealed under extreme pressure." Elias exhaled, slow and steady. "It's there, then. We just need to reach it without triggering collapse. Caution recommended. The surrounding strata are fragile. Structural disruption could destabilize the entire dune field." He studied the hologram. The channels beneath the estate formed a pattern too precise to be natural, curved lines intersecting in rhythmic arcs, like the veins of a living organism. "It's not just geology," he murmured. "Someone shaped this. Long before us." "The pattern corresponds with ancient Thessari geomantic grids," Selka, 9 said. "Designed to channel thermal energy. Possibly a method of planetary water regulation." Elias's mind raced. "If I can reactivate even part of it." He didn't finish the thought. The wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of ozone and mineral heat. A shadow moved across the dunes, vast and deliberate. Elias turned just as a silhouette emerged from the horizon, Archon Dravis, his wings stretched wide like obsidian sails. The air shimmered with his approach, rippling under the weight of his psionic field. "Human," Dravis said as he landed, sand scattering around him like sparks. His voice was colder than Viritha's, clipped and metallic. "You meddle in affairs beyond your comprehension." Elias wiped the sweat from his brow. "You must be Archon Dravis." The dragon's eyes glowed faintly blue. "I am the guardian of what remains pure. You, however, are the rot creeping into sacred ground." "I'm an engineer," Elias said. "Not a conqueror." "Engineers build the tools of conquest," Dravis replied. "Do not pretend innocence while you burrow beneath her estate like a parasite." He stepped closer, each movement precise and disdainful. "You think because the matriarch hesitates to crush you, I will share her restraint?" Elias met his gaze without flinching. "If you wanted me dead, you wouldn't be talking." Dravis's tail lashed, carving a trench through the sand. "You speak boldly for a creature whose bones I could scatter with a breath." "Then why haven't you?" Elias asked. The dragon's expression flickered, annoyance, perhaps even grudging respect. "Because she forbade it. For reasons beyond me." His wings shifted, folding halfway. "You've infected her mind with curiosity. Be proud of your small victory while it lasts." Elias glanced toward the horizon where Viritha's estate shimmered in the rising heat. "Maybe she's just tired of watching things die." "Careful," Dravis warned, voice low. "You speak as if you understand her. You do not. She has lived 10,000 of your lifetimes. You are a flicker of dust in her shadow." "Dust can still settle," Elias said. "Sometimes where it matters." For a long moment, neither moved. Then Dravis's claws flexed, scoring deep lines in the sand. "You mistake patience for weakness. This planet has devoured species greater than yours. When it consumes you, I will not weep." With that, he launched into the air, the downdraft flattening the dunes for 100 meters around. The silence that followed was heavy, almost sacred. Selka, 9 reappeared in a flicker of light. "Hostile encounter recorded. Threat probability remains high." Elias adjusted his collar, eyes still on the sky. "He's scared. Analysis suggests aggression, not fear." "No," Elias said softly. "Fear hides behind both." He turned back to the relay and activated the stabilization field. A low thrum rippled through the ground as the drones began to sink. The holographic grid glowed brighter, shifting from blue to gold. "Time to show them something worth fearing." "Procedure?" Selka, 9 asked. "Pressure equalization through microfracture induction. Controlled, slow release. We'll let the desert breathe. Risk level, critical. Failure could result in seismic collapse." "Then let's not fail." He keyed the command. Deep beneath the surface, the drones responded, thousands of tiny vibrations pulsing through the rock. The dunes trembled, then stilled. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, a faint hiss. The sand shifted. Steam began to rise in thin white ribbons. Elias's heart quickened. Selka's tone sharpened. Thermal readings climbing. Pressure differential stabilizing. "Good," Elias whispered. Hold it steady. The hiss grew louder, turning into a deep, resonant hum. The ground beneath him vibrated like the skin of a drum. Suddenly, a jet of vapor burst from a fissure 20 meters away, arcing high into the air before dispersing in glittering mist. The scent of mineral water filled the air, clean, sharp, alive. Elias grinned. We found it. The hum intensified. Another vent erupted, then another, forming a ring around the dunes. Steam coalesced into drifting clouds, pale against the red sky. The desert, once silent, now whispered with movement. Alert, Selka said. Massive energy signature approaching, Lady Virith, vector incoming. Elias looked up. Across the sky, a flash of bronze wings cut through the light. She descended fast, her landing stirring a storm of heat and dust. Her eyes locked on the steam vents, wide with something between rage and astonishment. What have you done? She demanded. Elias stepped forward, face streaked with dust. I woke it up. You risked collapse, she thundered. You could have destroyed everything. But I didn't. He gestured toward the drifting vapor. It's breathing again. Thessera Prime isn't dead. It's waiting to live. Virith stared at him, her expression unreadable. The steam rose between them like ghosts of a forgotten sea. The scent of wet sand hung heavy in the air, the first hint of life returning to the wasteland. She lowered her head, eyes narrowing. You play with gods, human. No, Elias said quietly. I build with what they left behind. The silence stretched, broken only by the slow hiss of escaping steam. Then, for the first time since he'd met her, Virith said nothing at all. She only watched the horizon, where faint clouds gathered over the desert that had known none for 1,000 years. The day burned hotter than any before. The desert shimmered, no longer a flat expanse of dead heat but a living mirage of motion. Veins of vapor rose from fissures like silver ghosts, spreading across the horizon. The air was heavy with moisture, carrying a scent none on Thessera Prime had smelled in generations. Wet sand and faint salt. The oasis had begun to change, and the world was watching. Elias stood beside the relay hub, sweat streaking through the dust on his face, eyes locked on the data feed dancing across his wrist. The aquifer's pressure had stabilized. The drones had found equilibrium. The hum beneath the surface pulsed like a heartbeat, steady, alive. For the first time since he'd arrived, he allowed himself to breathe. Selka 9 drifted nearby, projecting a shimmering model of the subterranean channels. Water distribution increasing across the lower strata. Flow expansion detected toward the eastern basin. That's her territory, Elias murmured. She'll feel it. Before the words had finished leaving his lips, a shadow crossed the dunes. Archon Dravis descended in a storm of dust, his wings snapping open with a sound like breaking glass. He landed hard, sending ripples through the loose sand. The air grew colder with his presence. I warned you, human, Dravis said, his voice a hiss of fury barely restrained. You defile sacred ground, and she allows it. Her weakness infects us all. Elias took a slow step back. If weakness means giving a damn about what happens to this world, maybe it's time you caught it too. Dravis's eyes burned like frozen fire. You think your machines are salvation? They are blasphemy. The desert is sacred because it endures. You would drown it. I'd let it live, Elias countered. You mistake endurance for decay. Dravis's tail cut through the sand like a blade. Enough, he roared, the sound shaking the dunes. I will not let you poison her with your delusions. Elias braced himself as the air thickened, energy gathering in the dragon's chest. But before the blast came, another presence descended from above, a blaze of molten bronze and gold. Virith struck the ground between them, wings flaring wide, her voice cutting through the storm. Enough, Dravis. The shockwave of her landing sent sand streaming outward in perfect spirals. The two dragons faced each other, one gleaming like dawn, the other dark as cooled obsidian. The tension between them was electric, old as their bloodlines. Dravis's claws dug into the ground. You defend him still? A trespasser, a thief? I defend what I see, Virith said, her voice low but sharp. The sands stir. The earth breathes. He has done what our kind forgot how to do. He manipulates you, Dravis spat. He plays at godhood, and you call it rebirth. You shame your lineage. Virith stepped closer, her eyes narrowing. And you shame it with fear. Dravis's wings rose higher, trembling with fury. Fear keeps us alive. No, she said. It keeps us dying slower. The air shimmered between them, heat waves rising from their bodies. Elias could barely stand the pressure radiating from their standoff. His instruments crackled, overloaded by psionic interference. Selka, 9 flickered uncertainly beside him. Dravis's voice turned to venom. You would side with the lesser race. You would share our dominion with these short-lived parasites. Viritha's reply came calm and cutting. I would share it with those who still believe in change. A low growl rippled from Dravis's chest. Then you are lost. His wings snapped wide, energy coiling in his throat, a growing sphere of white heat. Elias moved without thinking. Wait, he shouted. Dravis, if you kill me, you destroy proof of what's happening. Look. He turned his wrist display toward them. The projection shimmered, a living image of the planet's subsurface grid. The aquifers glowed bright blue, spreading outward in veins of light. The planet's responding, he said. Not to conquest, not to war, her wings folded close, scales glimmering like cooling metal. You have until dawn, she said, and with a single beat of her wings, she lifted into the air, vanishing into the heat haze horizon. Elias stood alone again, the desert settling back into its silence. Selka's voice returned, softer than before. Probability of her cooperation has increased. Emotional resonance detected, uncertainty, curiosity, restrained hostility. She's listening, Elias said quietly. That's all I needed. The wind stirred once more, carrying the faint scent of ozone and mineral steam. Elias turned his gaze toward the estate silhouette against the moons, his eyes reflecting the faint blue glow of his scanner. Somewhere beneath that desert skin, water waited. And so did she. The first light of dawn bled slowly across the dunes, washing the world in pale gold. The heat of Thessera Prime returned like a living thing, crawling back over the sands as if reclaiming them from the night. Elias stood beside the main relay hub, the faint hum of buried drones pulsing beneath his boots. He hadn't slept. His eyes were fixed on the data streaming across his wrist display, the pulse of the desert rendered as a shifting hologram of light and depth. Subsurface scan complete, Selka, 9 reported, its voice crisp in the morning stillness. An interconnected aquifer system confirmed at 2.7 kilometers depth. Estimated capacity, 30 million cubic meters of condensed vapor. Composition suggests recoverable water, though sealed under extreme pressure. Elias exhaled, slow and steady. It's there, then. We just need to reach it without triggering collapse. Caution recommended. The surrounding strata are fragile. Structural disruption could destabilize the entire dune field. He studied the hologram. The channels beneath the estate formed a pattern too precise to be natural, curved lines intersecting in rhythmic arcs, like the veins of a living organism. It's not just geology, he murmured. Someone shaped this. Long before us. The pattern corresponds with ancient Thessari geomantic grids, Selka, 9 said. Designed to channel thermal energy. Possibly a method of planetary water regulation. Elias's mind raced. If I can reactivate even part of it. He didn't finish the thought. The wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of ozone and mineral heat. A shadow moved across the dunes, vast and deliberate. Elias turned just as a silhouette emerged from the horizon, Archon Dravis, his wings stretched wide like obsidian sails. The air shimmered with his approach, rippling under the weight of his psionic field. "Human," Dravis said as he landed, sand scattering around him like sparks. His voice was colder than Viritha's, clipped and metallic. "You meddle in affairs beyond your comprehension." Elias wiped the sweat from his brow. "You must be Archon Dravis." The dragon's eyes glowed faintly blue. "I am the guardian of what remains pure. You, however, are the rot creeping into sacred ground." "I'm an engineer," Elias said. "Not a conqueror." "Engineers build the tools of conquest," Dravis replied. "Do not pretend innocence while you burrow beneath her estate like a parasite." He stepped closer, each movement precise and disdainful. "You think because the matriarch hesitates to crush you, I will share her restraint?" Elias met his gaze without flinching. "If you wanted me dead, you wouldn't be talking." Dravis's tail lashed, carving a trench through the sand. "You speak boldly for a creature whose bones I could scatter with a breath." "Then why haven't you?" Elias asked. The dragon's expression flickered, annoyance, perhaps even grudging respect. "Because she forbade it. For reasons beyond me." His wings shifted, folding halfway. "You've infected her mind with curiosity. Be proud of your small victory while it lasts." Elias glanced toward the horizon where Viritha's estate shimmered in the rising heat. "Maybe she's just tired of watching things die." "Careful," Dravis warned, voice low. "You speak as if you understand her. You do not. She has lived 10,000 of your lifetimes. You are a flicker of dust in her shadow." "Dust can still settle," Elias said. "Sometimes where it matters." For a long moment, neither moved. Then Dravis's claws flexed, scoring deep lines in the sand. "You mistake patience for weakness. This planet has devoured species greater than yours. When it consumes you, I will not weep." With that, he launched into the air, the downdraft flattening the dunes for 100 meters around. The silence that followed was heavy, almost sacred. Selka, 9 reappeared in a flicker of light. "Hostile encounter recorded. Threat probability remains high." Elias adjusted his collar, eyes still on the sky. "He's scared. Analysis suggests aggression, not fear." "No," Elias said softly. "Fear hides behind both." He turned back to the relay and activated the stabilization field. A low thrum rippled through the ground as the drones began to sink. The holographic grid glowed brighter, shifting from blue to gold. "Time to show them something worth fearing." "Procedure?" Selka, 9 asked. "Pressure equalization through microfracture induction. Controlled, slow release. We'll let the desert breathe. Risk level, critical. Failure could result in seismic collapse." "Then let's not fail." He keyed the command. Deep beneath the surface, the drones responded, thousands of tiny vibrations pulsing through the rock. The dunes trembled, then stilled. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, a faint hiss. The sand shifted. Steam began to rise in thin white ribbons. Elias's heart quickened. Selka's tone sharpened. Thermal readings climbing. Pressure differential stabilizing. "Good," Elias whispered. "Hold it steady." The hiss grew louder, turning into a deep, resonant hum. The ground beneath him vibrated like the skin of a drum. Suddenly, a jet of vapor burst from a fissure 20 meters away, arcing high into the air before dispersing in glittering mist. The scent of mineral water filled the air, clean, sharp, alive. Elias grinned. "We found it." The hum intensified. Another vent erupted, then another, forming a ring around the dunes. Steam coalesced into drifting clouds, pale against the red sky. The desert, once silent, now whispered with movement. "Alert," Selka said. Massive energy signature approaching, Lady Virith, vector incoming. Elias looked up. Across the sky, a flash of bronze wings cut through the light. She descended fast, her landing stirring a storm of heat and dust. Her eyes locked on the steam vents, wide with something between rage and astonishment. What have you done? She demanded. Elias stepped forward, face streaked with dust. I woke it up. You risked collapse, she thundered. You could have destroyed everything. But I didn't. He gestured toward the drifting vapor. It's breathing again. Thessera Prime isn't dead. It's waiting to live. Virith stared at him, her expression unreadable. The steam rose between them like ghosts of a forgotten sea. The scent of wet sand hung heavy in the air, the first hint of life returning to the wasteland. She lowered her head, eyes narrowing. You play with gods, human. No, Elias said quietly. I build with what they left behind. The silence stretched, broken only by the slow hiss of escaping steam. Then, for the first time since he'd met her, Virith said nothing at all. She only watched the horizon, where faint clouds gathered over the desert that had known none for 1,000 years. The day burned hotter than any before. The desert shimmered, no longer a flat expanse of dead heat but a living mirage of motion. Veins of vapor rose from fissures like silver ghosts, spreading across the horizon. The air was heavy with moisture, carrying a scent none on Thessera Prime had smelled in generations. Wet sand and faint salt. The oasis had begun to change, and the world was watching. Elias stood beside the relay hub, sweat streaking through the dust on his face, eyes locked on the data feed dancing across his wrist. The aquifer's pressure had stabilized. The drones had found equilibrium. The hum beneath the surface pulsed like a heartbeat. When the dust cleared, silence fell. The smaller dragons had fled, streaking into the storm. Dravis lay half buried in the sand, his body still, smoke rising from the cracks in his scales. Elias stood frozen, the wind tugging at him, the smell of ozone thick in his lungs. Virith turned to him slowly, her breath ragged. Her eyes met his, tired, defiant, and something else. It's begun, she whispered. They will not forgive this. Elias nodded, his voice hoarse. Then we'll be ready. Virith looked to the horizon. The storm was breaking. Through its thinning veil, faint rain still fell, shimmering as it met the earth. For the first time, the sand did not swallow it whole, it soaked in. The planet's pulse grew stronger. Beneath their feet, the world stirred again. The desert was no longer silent. The drones that once hummed faintly now sang in unison with the earth's own rhythm. The sands moved like liquid metal, reshaping themselves around the fissures where vapor rose in slow spirals. The air was cooler, dense with moisture and energy. Above the fractured ridges, lightning curled silently through a sky the color of dying embers. Elias stood beside the main conduit, his eyes scanning the flickering data across the holodisplay. Subsurface grid is stable, he muttered. Pressure equalized across the western field. Evaporation rates down 12%. Selka, 9 hovered beside him, its blue light pulsing softly. Water retention within projected thresholds. Probability of sustained hydrological balance, 81%. 81, Elias repeated, half smiling. Not bad for a day that started with a dragon war. The drone's tone sharpened. Incoming vector. Large thermal signature. Not Archon Dravis. Elias tensed. Then who? Before Selka could answer, the wind tore across the dunes. A streak of molten light cut through the clouds, Virith, descending fast. She landed in a gust of hot wind that scattered sand and steam alike. Her scales were dulled from battle, her wings frayed at the edges, but her presence was as fierce as ever. Dravis? Elias asked. Alive, she said, voice low. Broken, but breathing. The others fled to the basalt citadels. They will not stay silent long. Elias ran a hand through his hair. Then the houses will rally. They already are, she said. You've become their symbol of contamination. He gave a small, humorless laugh. That's new. Her gaze lingered on him, unblinking. Do you regret it? He met her eyes. No. Virith lowered her head slightly. Then prepare yourself, human. What you began cannot be undone. A tremor rolled through the ground, subtle but deep. Elias steadied himself against the console. That wasn't seismic, he said. No, Virith murmured, turning toward the horizon. That was the planet breathing. The dunes rippled like the surface of a stirred sea. In the distance, a column of light pierced the clouds, reaching from the desert floor into the sky. The hum of the old network deepened, vibrating through their bones. Elias stared, stunned. What is that? The heart of Thessera, Virith said. A core well. My ancestors sealed it before your species learned flight. If it awakens, the cycle will complete. Cycle. Destruction, renewal, balance, she said. The pulse that kept this world alive when our arrogance nearly killed it. Elias turned to his equipment. If it's reactivating, the geothermal pressure could overload the grid. We'll lose everything if we don't redirect it. You can control this? She asked, her tone both wary and curious. Maybe not control, Elias said, but guide. Selka's tone grew sharp. Warning, energy surge approaching critical. Network strain at 92%. Immediate intervention required. Elias's hands moved quickly across the holographic interface, rerouting conduits, opening flow valves buried deep beneath the sand. Streams of light burst across the display, blue, gold, red. Connecting like veins. Selka, engage relay nodes 40 through 52. Virith, I'll need your help. Her wings flared slightly. My help? Your energy, he said. Your link to the planet. You can stabilize it better than any machine I've got. Her eyes narrowed. You ask much of me, human. And you've done harder things, he replied. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she stepped closer to the conduit, her talons sinking into the soft sand. What must I do? Channel your psionics into the field when I give the signal. Match the rhythm of the pulse, you'll feel it through the ground. Virith lowered her wings, the bronze glow of her scales flickering brighter. If you are wrong. Then we both die, Elias said. So let's not be wrong. The air thickened as the light intensified. The hum deepened into a thunderous resonance that shook the dunes apart. Viritha's eyes flared, and energy burst from her chest, a storm of gold and crimson that poured into the relay core. Elias triggered the sequence. The desert erupted in light. Lines of fire raced outward, tracing the ancient Thessari lattice beneath the surface. The horizon became a map of burning veins. Elias could feel it through his bones, the pulse of the world syncing with his heartbeat. Stabilization at 60%, Selka said, voice trembling through distortion. 70. 80. A surge cut the signal. The ground cracked beneath Elias's feet, a fissure splitting open beside him. Heat surged upward, almost throwing him off balance. He grabbed the railing, teeth clenched. Virith, now. Her roar shattered the air. She poured more energy into the conduit, her entire body glowing with molten light. The fissures widened, then froze mid-motion, as though time itself had halted. The pulse steadied. The storm above them dimmed, replaced by a shimmering glow that cascaded down like rain. Elias stumbled back as the ground sealed itself, the air filled with faint mist. The light faded slowly, leaving the desert quiet once more. Selka's voice returned, faint but clear. Grid stabilization achieved. Energy redistribution complete. Core well active at 40% output. Environmental balance optimal. Elias collapsed to his knees, laughing breathlessly. We did it. Viratha's form dimmed, the glow of her scales softening. She looked down at him with something like astonishment. You have awakened a world. He looked up, dust streaking his face. We awakened it, he said. Together. For a long moment, they both stood in silence, listening. The desert no longer sounded empty. The dunes whispered like waves. Somewhere beneath them, water flowed, quiet, constant, alive. Virath finally spoke, her voice softer than he'd ever heard it. The houses will come. They will see this as heresy. Elias stood, meeting her gaze. Then let them come. I've got work to finish. Her expression changed, amusement, pride, maybe even a trace of something gentler. She extended one massive claw, pressing it lightly against the sand beside him. Then build, human. And I will stand between you and the storm. Elias smiled faintly. I'll hold you to that. She spread her wings, sending a warm gust across the platform. As she rose into the air, droplets of condensed vapor clung to her scales, scattering light in all directions. For the first time since he'd arrived on Thessera Prime, Elias looked around and saw not desolation, but beginnings. The desert exhaled, and the sound it made was almost like rain. The next dawn came heavy with mist. A fine silver fog blanketed the desert, veiling the horizon in soft light. The sands no longer glittered like glass, they glowed faintly from beneath, alive with residual energy from the awakened lattice. The air felt dense, charged with moisture and the low hum of power flowing under the ground. The world had shifted again, and Elias could feel it with every breath. He stood on the terrace of the estate, leaning on the railing, watching the mist swirl between the dunes. The silence was strange, neither hostile nor empty. Selka, 9 hovered beside him, its soft blue projection flickering. Atmospheric readings are unprecedented. Relative humidity now at 41%. Vegetative microspores detected. Microspores? Elias turned to the display. Where the hell would they come from? Residual dormant flora structures in the soil. Catalyzed by moisture and heat variance. Regeneration possible. Elias exhaled slowly. Thessara's not just alive, it's remembering. Before Selka could reply, the estate sensors pulsed red. A proximity alert flared across the display. Multiple inbound signatures, large and fast. Elias's stomach tightened. Contact vector. Descending from the north, Selka said. Energy pattern matches Thessari psionic fields, dozens of them. Elias's eyes flicked to the sky. Dark shapes were already cutting through the mist, their wings slicing silently through the thin air. The storm he and Virath had feared was coming. Moments later, the first of the dragons broke through the haze, sleek, scaled forms of obsidian, silver, and pale gold. They landed in arcs, surrounding the estate in a precise formation. Their presence bent the air itself. At their center came Dravis. His once perfect scales were scarred from battle, his movement slower, but his eyes still burned with fury. Virath descended soon after, landing on the high ridge above them. Her bronze wings caught the faint morning light, the reflection rippling across the fog. Archons of the houses, she called out, her voice steady and resonant, you come uninvited to my domain. Dravis's reply was low, sharp, and laced with venom. Your domain has become an infection. We come to cleanse it. Viratha's gaze hardened. You call it infection because it thrives without your permission. Murmurs rippled through the assembled dragons, deep and resonant. Elias could feel the tension in the air like static before lightning. He stepped out onto the terrace, dust-streaked and unarmed, though Selka's faint projection followed like a hovering ghost. I suppose I'm the infection you mean, Elias said. Several dragons hissed, their eyes flaring. Dravis turned his head toward him, slow and deliberate. Human. You defy the houses even now? I'm not defying anyone, Elias said evenly. I'm fixing what everyone else forgot how to care about. The Archon's voice rumbled. You've disrupted the balance. You've woken forces meant to sleep. You endanger all life on this world, and you do it for pride. Elias took a step forward. No. For hope. The word hung in the air, fragile and alien. The dragons stirred uneasily, as if the sound itself offended them. Viratha's gaze moved slowly across the circle. He speaks truth. Thessera was dying. Our silence killed it. Our arrogance let it burn. Dravis's wings snapped open, his fury unmasked. Our silence preserved what remained. You would gamble the bones of our ancestors for the dream of a human child? Viratha's voice cut through the rising growl of the others. This child has done more for our world than any of us have in millennia. Elias could feel her energy building, steady, protective. But the others were not swayed. The ground trembled as Dravis's psionic field expanded, spreading like a wave. The dragons roared in unison, their anger manifesting in a chorus that shook the air. Elias's ears rang, his balance faltered. Selka flickered beside him, its voice fractured through static. Danger level escalating. Recommend retreat. No, Elias said, his voice strained but determined. If we run now, it's over. He looked up at the dragons, his voice rising. You think you're defending your world. But you're just afraid of it changing. You think I'm your enemy, but I've done nothing you couldn't have done yourselves. Dravis's eyes narrowed. Enough. A sphere of white-blue energy began to form in his throat, pulsing with deadly light. The air rippled with heat. Elias braced himself, but Virith moved faster. Her wings swept wide as she leapt into the air, interposing herself between Elias and Dravis's blast. The energy struck her full in the chest, exploding into a shockwave that hurled sand and vapor in all directions. Elias was thrown backward, crashing hard against the terrace. His ears rang with the force of it. When the light faded, Virith stood smoking, her breath ragged. Her scales were cracked and blackened where the blast had struck. Enough, she roared. Her voice rolled across the dunes, silencing the storm. She turned her gaze upon Dravis, her eyes blazing. You speak of legacy, yet you destroy the very thing that sustains it. Do you even hear what you've become? Dravis's snarl faltered. For a heartbeat, something like doubt crossed his face. Virith lowered her wings slowly. He builds, Dravis. You only break. The other dragons shifted uneasily. Their eyes moved between the two archons, the crackling air heavy with indecision. Elias pushed himself to his feet, coughing, his voice hoarse but steady. I didn't come here to rule your world, he said. I came to help it live. But maybe it doesn't matter who helps, as long as someone does. The mist thickened around them, carrying the faint scent of rain. Overhead, clouds gathered where none had existed moments before. The low hum of the awakened lattice pulsed through the air, resonating with the beat of their hearts. One of the younger dragons, a slender one with silver wings, lifted his head. The air changes, he murmured. I can feel it. The pulse is true. Others began to murmur as well, uncertain but intrigued. Dravis glared, his wings trembling with restrained rage. You would turn the houses against me with illusions? Viratha's voice softened, almost weary. No illusion. Just life. Elias looked to the horizon. There, through the rising mist, the first green shoots pushed through the sand, tiny, fragile, impossible. The dragons saw it too. Silence fell. Even Dravis did not move. Virith turned toward him. Choose, Archon. Destroy what rises, or let your world breathe again. The obsidian dragon stared at the growing patch of green, the glow of the mist reflected in his eyes. He said nothing. The storm that surrounded him slowly dissipated, his energy field dimming. Without another word, he spread his wings and launched into the air, vanishing into the clouds above. One by one, the others followed. When they were gone, only Virith remained, her breathing shallow, her chest still marked with the burn of Dravis's strike. Elias ran to her side. "You're hurt." "I will mend," she said, her voice rough. "The planet heals faster than I." He looked out over the desert, where the mist swirled around the green patch that continued to grow, spreading slowly like ink through water. "Then maybe it's finally starting." Virith exhaled softly, her eyes closing. "No," she murmured. "It's returning." And above them, for the first time in 1,000 years, the sky began to rain in earnest. The rain did not stop for 3 cycles. It fell in slow, silver curtains that turned the sand into soft, reflective plains. The air tasted of metal and renewal. Rivers carved through dunes that had not known motion in centuries. From the estate's high terrace, Elias watched as the water pooled and shimmered under the faint morning light. It should have been impossible, but Thessera was alive again, gasping, uncertain, but alive. Virith slept for most of those days, her body recovering from the blast that had nearly split her core. The wounds along her chest and wings healed in pale patterns that shimmered faintly, like molten glass cooling in moonlight. When she woke, she was quieter, her usual sharpness tempered by exhaustion and thought. On the 4th day, she joined Elias on the terrace. She stood still for a long while, her head lowered, wings folded tightly. "The rain has memory," she said softly. "Each drop carries echo from when this world was green. I can hear it in the resonance." Elias nodded, his voice quiet. "It's not just the planet remembering. It's the people too. Or it could be." Her gaze flicked toward him. "You still believe in them?" "I have to," he said. "If I didn't, none of this would mean anything." She studied him for a long time, her golden eyes unreadable. Then she looked back to the growing wetlands that stretched outward from the estate. "The houses will not stay silent," she said finally. "Dravis may have retreated, but his shame will drive him. The others will choose sides." Elias's jaw tightened. "Then we'll have to make sure they choose the right one." She tilted her head, the faintest glimmer of amusement crossing her expression. "You speak as if you command dragons." "I don't," he said. "But I might be able to convince them that cooperation is smarter than extinction." He tapped the rail with his finger, thinking. "The lattice is stable now. It's regulating pressure, distributing moisture evenly. That means we can create controlled zones, habitable regions. Once the environment balances, the houses won't be able to ignore it. They'll see what happens when we work together." Viritha's wings shifted slightly. "You intend to build?" He smiled faintly. "It's what humans do best. And maybe dragons too, if they let themselves remember." The wind rose, carrying the scent of wet earth and something new, growth. Far below, sprouts unfurled through the damp sand, pale green at first, then darkening into shades of blue and amber. Flowers opened under the falling rain, their petals trembling like fragile instruments catching the rhythm of the world's rebirth. That night, the estate systems pulsed with new data. Selka's voice filled the chamber softly. "Environmental recalibration complete. Viable biospheres expanding across 8% of regional terrain. Planetary resonance stable." Elias sat by Viritha's resting chamber, her form curled among the still warm sands. He glanced at the holographic readouts flickering above him. "It's spreading faster than I expected," he murmured. Selka's light dimmed to a softer tone. "You have altered the lattice permanently. Its primary function is no longer containment, it is renewal." "Good," Elias said. "Then Thessara's finally free." The AI paused. "You understand this action will also alter the house's power structure. Energy drawn from the lattice once sustained them. You have redistributed it to the planet's biosphere. Elias exhaled slowly. Then maybe it's time they start living like everyone else. The following morning, a shadow passed over the estate. Elias looked up instinctively. A massive shape circled above, sleek, silver, unfamiliar. He ran outside as the dragon descended. Its landing sent ripples through the wet sand, droplets splashing across its wings. It was not Travis. This one's scales were translucent like glass, and its eyes glowed with soft blue light. I come from the outer ridge, it said, voice deep but calm. The storms have ceased. Rivers flow where dunes once stood. You have done what the houses would not. Elias hesitated, unsure if this was accusation or praise. I didn't do it alone. The dragon's gaze shifted toward the estate, where Virith stepped out, her wings half-folded, her presence commanding even in silence. The newcomer bowed its head. Archon Virith. The conclave calls for assembly. The houses fracture, some demand destruction of the lattice, others seek alliance with the human. Viritha's eyes narrowed. They would summon me now, after centuries of silence. They fear what you've created, the dragon said simply. Virith glanced at Elias. They will come for us, Elias. Whether with words or with fire. He nodded, already expecting it. Then we'll meet them before they decide which to use. By nightfall, the rain had weakened into a mist. The estate shimmered in the faint glow of the newly risen moons. Elias stood beside Virith at the edge of the dunes, looking out at the horizon where distant flashes of light signaled the gathering of others, dragons converging, their wings cutting the storm. You could still leave, she said quietly. Before they arrive. He smiled, faint and tired. And miss this? Not a chance. For a moment, something like warmth flickered behind her eyes. She inclined her head slightly, a gesture that could almost have been respect. You are either the most foolish man alive or the most dangerous. Maybe both, he said. But at least I'm on your side. She turned her gaze toward the glowing horizon, her voice a low murmur. We will see if that is enough. As the night deepened, the lattice beneath the sands pulsed with rhythm, echoing through the wet air. The sky shimmered faintly with static light as if the planet itself was preparing to speak. Somewhere in that vast desert, between life reborn and power contested, a fragile new dawn waited for judgment. The conclave convened beneath a stormless sky for the first time in recorded memory. The meeting ground lay within a vast basin carved by the new rivers, surrounded by ridges where the dragons perched in spirals of color and light. The air trembled with their collective energy. The desert's heart, once barren, now shimmered with shallow water reflecting the twin moons. Above it all, the lattice's faint hum resonated through the air like a heartbeat. Elias stood at the center beside Virith. He felt small among them, an ant in a cathedral of living gods, but his resolve had hardened. He had seen the planet breathe again, seen what could rise from ruin. Beside him, Virith radiated calm authority, her scales gleaming bronze and gold, her wounds fully healed though the scars still traced her chest like constellations. The conclave began without ceremony. Travis appeared first among the elders, landing with a thunderclap of wings. His once glossy scales were dulled, his movements slower, but the fury in his gaze had cooled into something else, determination mixed with pride. Around him stood the other archons, each representing an ancient lineage. Viritha's voice carried across the basin. We meet not to decide who commands Thessera, but to decide if Thessera will survive us. Travis's deep voice answered her. You speak of survival while your human rewrote the core lattice. The balance that kept this world from burning again now bends to his will. Elias met his gaze. It doesn't bend to me, it bends to life. The lattice was never meant to imprison the world. You used it as a chain when it could have been a spine. A murmur rippled through the assembled dragons. Some growled, others murmured in thought. The air shimmered with psychic tension. A pale dragon from the eastern ridge leaned forward, her voice a whisper that still carried. The rains have returned. The rivers sing. The sands no longer scorch. Perhaps the human speaks truth. Another, his wings marked with sigils of authority, hissed. He brings danger. What happens when humans spread again? When their hunger returns? Viratha's wings unfurled slightly, a silent command for calm. He has shown restraint where we showed none. He could have claimed the lattice's power for himself. Instead, he gave it back to the world. Dravis's claws gouged the earth, carving deep furrows. And what of our power, Archon Virath? You speak as if the houses were irrelevant. She looked at him, unflinching. They are, if they cannot evolve. The silence that followed was heavier than any roar. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Elias stepped forward, the soft splash of water marking his steps. You keep talking about power as if it's something you own, he said. But power's not ownership, it's stewardship. You've been its jailers, and it's killing you. Thessera doesn't need rulers. It needs guardians. Dravis's eyes narrowed. And you would name yourself one? Elias shook his head. No. But I'll help build the first of them. He activated the small projection disc he'd brought. A holographic map bloomed above the water, showing spreading zones of moisture, growing vegetation, and geothermal nodes, each marked with resonance data. These regions are stabilizing. With guidance, you could create sanctuaries, harmony points. Places where dragons and humans both can live and study this rebirth. No dominion, no borders. Shared guardianship. The hologram pulsed faintly, mirroring the rhythm of the lattice. Around the basin, the dragons murmured again, but this time not with hostility. Curiosity crept in. Viratha's voice softened. He offers us a chance to begin again, not as conquerors, not as relics, but as something worthy of this world. Dravis lifted his head toward the sky. The faint hum of the lattice vibrated in his chest. He could feel its pulse aligning with the rainfall, with the slow bloom of new life beneath the surface. It was no illusion. The world was changing, and not dying from it. Finally, he lowered his gaze. The houses will fracture, he said. Old blood will not yield easily. Then let it fracture, Virath said quietly. So that something stronger can grow. The basin filled with stillness. Elias waited, heart pounding. Then, without another word, Dravis extended his wings, not in challenge, but acknowledgement. He bowed his head slightly toward Virath, then toward Elias. Guardianship, he said, as if tasting the word. Perhaps that is a better chain. One by one, the other dragons followed. Their energy fields pulsed in resonance, the air shimmering as they lowered their wings. The sound that followed was neither roar nor thunder, it was harmony, deep and vast, vibrating through the basin and into the lattice below. The ground answered. The water rippled outward, glowing faintly as the network beneath the surface synchronized with the dragon's resonance. The desert itself seemed to exhale. Elias felt the vibration pass through his bones. For the first time, he wasn't afraid of it. He looked up at Virath, who stood tall, her expression unreadable but calm. It's done, he said softly. She inclined her head. No. It's begun. In the days that followed, the transformation spread. The rains grew lighter, rhythmic. Streams turned to rivers, rivers to shallow lakes. New flora unfurled, blue grasses, translucent vines, silver-leaved trees that shimmered in moonlight. Dragons soared above the wetlands, their reflections mirrored perfectly below. Humans arrived from the scattered outposts, guided by the lattice beacons, finding not hostility but guidance from the great winged beings once feared as gods. The estate remained, half-buried now in flowering dunes, repurposed as the first Concord node. Elias walked its halls with Selka's soft hum beside him, watching as humans and Thessari engineers worked side by side. Virath often stayed above, flying patrols over the newborn rivers. But sometimes she landed near the terrace, watching him in silence, as if still trying to understand how something so fragile had changed her world. One evening, as the twin suns dipped low, Elias stood beside her on the high ridge. The air smelled of rain and life. "You think they'll keep it?" he asked quietly. Viratha's eyes traced the horizon, where green stretched farther every day. "Not forever," she said. "Nothing is kept forever. But perhaps they will remember longer this time." He smiled faintly. "That's enough." She turned to him, her expression softer than he had ever seen it. "You've done what no dragon could, Elias. You taught us to see again. And you taught us what's worth seeing," he said. The wind rose, carrying the distant sound of wings. The lattice shimmered faintly beneath their feet, its heartbeat now indistinguishable from the rhythm of the world itself. Virath spread her wings wide, and for a moment, the light caught them just right, gold and fire over green water, and Elias thought Thessera had never looked more alive. When she lifted into the air, the sky welcomed her without resistance, and the human below watched with quiet awe, knowing that for the first time in ages, neither of them owned the world they stood upon. They were simply part of it, together, as the desert bloomed beneath the dawn.